The North African campaign of 1942 is often remembered for the grand tank battles of El Alamein, but the most chilling event took place hundreds of miles away in the featureless void of the Great Sand Sea. It was here that a select group of British commandos from the newly formed SAS was tasked with a mission so sensitive that its name was struck from the official war diary. Operation Blind Horizon was led by Captain Arthur Pritchard, a man known for his cold logic and tactical brilliance. His orders were to find and neutralize a German convoy that had bypassed all known supply routes. British intelligence had intercepted a series of frantic encoded signals from the Abwehr referring to a cargo that could silence the desert. Pritchard and his 12 men moved out in modified Willys Jeeps and Chevrolet trucks, knowing that if they failed, there would be no rescue and no record of their sacrifice. The desert in this sector was a place of extreme psychological pressure, where the heat mirages often played tricks on the eyes of even the most experienced trackers. However, the logs recovered from the unit's secondary supply drop point suggested that the anomalies they encountered were not mere illusions. Pritchard noted in his field diary that as they approached the projected path of Column X, their electronic compasses began to drift wildly, and the sand beneath their tires turned from yellow to a dull, metallic gray. The air itself felt heavy, as if charged with static electricity, and several men reported a persistent metallic taste in their mouths. This was the first sign that the German prototype was not a conventional weapon, but something that manipulated the electromagnetic field of the surrounding environment on a massive scale. By the third night of the patrol, the SAS unit made visual contact with the German convoy. Through their binoculars, they saw 8 heavy Mercedes-Benz trucks parked in a perfect circle in the middle of a dry lake bed. There were no campfires and no guards patrolling the perimeter. When Pritchard led a reconnaissance team into the camp, they were met with a scene that defied military logic. The German soldiers were all present, sitting in their vehicles or lying in their tents, but they were completely unresponsive. They were alive, but their eyes were vacant, as if their entire personalities had been drained away. There was no evidence of an attack or a struggle. The trucks were undamaged, and the cargo crates were still sealed. Pritchard's final radio transmission to the base at Cairo was short and filled with uncharacteristic panic, stating that the cargo was not a machine, but a void. The investigation into the disappearance of Pritchard's unit was suppressed by the British Foreign Office immediately after the war ended. When a recovery team was sent to the coordinates 3 weeks after the last radio contact, they found nothing. The dry lake bed was empty, and the shifting sands had covered any tracks that might have remained. However, the recovery team's leader, Colonel Thompson, noted in a private letter that the area felt unoccupied by time itself. He described a sensation of being watched by something that existed just beyond the visible horizon. All official reports from this recovery mission were later classified as destroyed by fire during a routine archive reorganization in 1954. But the rumors persisted among the veterans of the long-range desert group, who whispered about the unit that walked into a mirage and never came back. The real evidence of Operation Blind Horizon only surfaced in the late 1960s during a geological survey of the region. A team of engineers found the rusted remains of a British SAS Jeep half buried in a dune. The vehicle was in a state of impossible preservation, with the paint still looking fresh, but the metal underneath had been turned into a fine, brittle powder that crumbled at the slightest touch. Most disturbing was the discovery of a single brass compass lying on the driver's seat. The needle was not pointing north, but was spinning rapidly in a clockwise direction, as if caught in a permanent magnetic vortex. There were no human remains found at the site, and no clothing or equipment. It was as if the men had simply evaporated, leaving behind only the shells of their mechanical world. This discovery was quickly seized by British military authorities, and the site was once again declared a restricted zone. The disappearance of Captain Pritchard and his men triggered an immediate but silent crisis within the British Middle East Command in Cairo. Military intelligence officers were baffled by the lack of physical evidence at the dry lake bed, especially since the original radio fix had been pinpointed with absolute certainty. A second, more specialized unit was dispatched, but they were given a different cover story, being told they were searching for a downed RAF transport plane. This unit, led by a signals expert named Lieutenant Miller, was equipped with the latest radio direction finding gear of the time. Miller's reports, which were only recently declassified in a highly redacted form, noted that the entire region of the Great Sand Sea was emitting a steady, low-frequency oscillation that seemed to originate from beneath the desert floor. The desert was not just hiding a convoy, it was vibrating with a hidden energy that interfered with the very biological functions of the human brain. Miller's team managed to recover a single damaged radio handset from the edge of the dry lake bed that presumably belonged to the missing SAS unit. When the technical department in Cairo analyzed the internal components, they found that the copper wiring had been fused into a single solid mass of metal without any signs of heat or burning. It was as if a massive electromagnetic pulse had passed through the device, but at a frequency so specific that it only targeted the conductive properties of the metal. This suggested that the German column X was carrying a high-frequency sonic or electromagnetic emitter designed to disrupt the electrical impulses of both machines and the human nervous system. The German soldiers found by Pritchard were likely the first victims of their own cargo, having had their neural pathways effectively wiped clean by the prolonged exposure to the prototype's field. The psychological toll on the search teams began to manifest within 48 hours of entering the restricted zone. Men who were otherwise battle-hardened veterans of the North African campaign began to suffer from acute memory loss and disorientation. One sergeant reportedly forgot his own name and the names of his children, while another was found staring at a blank wall of sand, claiming he could see the ghosts of 1,000 trucks passing through the dunes. Lieutenant Miller realized that the void Pritchard had mentioned was an expanding field of cognitive erasure. The prototype was not just a weapon of war, but an accidental generator of a localized amnesia field. The SAS unit had not been captured or killed in a traditional sense. They had likely lost the very concept of who they were and wandered into the deep desert until they were consumed by the heat and the sand. As the search mission continued, the team discovered a series of perfectly circular depressions in the sand, spaced exactly 50 meters apart. These depressions were not tracks, but appeared to be the result of intense, localized pressure. Miller theorized that the German prototype was so heavy and generated such a powerful field that it was literally compacting the sand at a molecular level as it moved. The trail led toward an unexplored mountain range near the border of Libya and Egypt. However, the trail abruptly stopped at the entrance to a narrow canyon. Inside the canyon, the search team found several German helmets and boots neatly lined up on the ground, but there were no bodies. It was as if the soldiers had stepped out of their gear and vanished into the stone walls. Miller's final report before he was ordered to abandon the search stated that the canyon felt haunted by the echoes of people who no longer exist. The British command's decision to bury the files on Operation Blind Horizon was driven by a terrifying realization. If the Germans had perfected a weapon that could erase the human mind without firing a single bullet, the entire concept of warfare would be rendered obsolete. There would be no heroes, no prisoners, and no history, only a silent void where an army once stood. A secret directive was issued to the RAF to perform a series of high-altitude bombing runs over the canyon coordinates, not to destroy a specific target, but to trigger a massive landslide that would seal the area forever. The mission was recorded in the RAF logs as a navigational exercise involving the disposal of surplus ordnance. For the next 20 years, the location of the Blind Horizon incident remained a blank spot on the maps of the world, guarded by the shifting sands and the silence of the Foreign Office. The official silence of the post-war years was briefly shattered in 1958 when a former Abwehr technician who had defected to the West provided a different perspective on the mystery of Column X. The technician who worked under the alias Klaus revealed that the German prototype was never intended to be a weapon of mass destruction, but was instead a desperate attempt at total radar and sensory invisibility. The device code, named the Glock Desert, utilized counter-rotating magnetic fields to create a refractive bubble around the convoy. However, the German scientists had failed to account for the unique crystalline structure of the Saharan sand, which acted as a natural amplifier for the magnetic resonance. Instead of hiding the trucks from radar, the device had accidentally created a permanent rift in the local electromagnetic spectrum. Klaus claimed that the soldiers were not erased by a weapon, but were caught in a feedback loop of their own perceptions, effectively becoming invisible to themselves. British intelligence took these claims seriously enough to reopen the Blind Horizon file under a new classification known as Project Echo Search. This time, they utilized early helicopter patrols and high-sensitivity magnetic anomaly detectors to scan the canyon where Lieutenant Miller's trail had gone cold. The results were disturbing. The detectors recorded a massive subterranean signature that matched the shape of a military convoy. But the signature was not stationary. It appeared to be vibrating at a frequency that made it impossible to get a clear fix on its depth. One pilot reported that while hovering over the canyon, his cockpit instruments began to display data from a different time period, showing weather conditions and radio traffic from July 1942. This suggested that the magnetic anomaly was not just affecting matter, but was warping the local temporal field, creating a localized pocket where 1942 was still happening. The team at Echo Search managed to lower a specialized microphone into a narrow crevice in the canyon floor. The recording they captured, which remains one of the most guarded secrets of the MI6 archives, was 90 minutes of pure atmospheric static interspersed with the distinct sound of a British officer's voice. The voice, which was later identified by family members as Captain Pritchard, was calmly reciting a list of names, the names of his 12 men. However, the recording also captured a second sound, the sound of a German voice reciting the same names in a perfect British accent. This led to the terrifying theory that the anomaly had not just erased the men, but had merged their consciousness with the German soldiers they were sent to intercept. The desert had created a collective psychic entity trapped in a cycle of mutual observation and erasure. A ground team attempted to enter the crevice to retrieve any physical artifacts, but they were forced to retreat when they encountered a wall of air that felt like solid glass. Anyone who touched the surface of this wall reported a feeling of intense cold and the sudden loss of their short-term memory. One soldier who pushed his arm through the barrier found that when he pulled it back, his skin was covered in a fine metallic dust that could not be washed off. This dust was later analyzed and found to be composed of unstable isotopes of brass and steel, similar to the remains of the Jeep found years later. The barrier was not a physical wall, but a boundary where the molecular structure of the world was being broken down into its base elements. The Foreign Office realized that the void was still active and was slowly processing the materials of the canyon into a new, unknown form of matter. By 1960, Project Echo Search was officially terminated, and the entire region was declared a no-fly zone for all military and civilian aircraft. The British government reached a secret agreement with the Egyptian and Libyan authorities to keep the area off all petroleum exploration maps. The final report by the Echo Search director stated that the SAS unit and the German convoy had become a permanent environmental anomaly, a part of the desert's own geography. They were no longer soldiers or even ghosts, but had been converted into a mathematical constant of the Great Sand Sea. The mission was not just failed, it had resulted in the creation of a place where history simply stopped. To this day, the canyon remains a silent monument to a war that refused to end for those who entered the Blind Horizon. The termination of Project Echo Search did not stop the ripple effects of the anomaly from spreading through the clandestine channels of the Cold War. In 1972, a former British signals officer who had been stationed in Cyprus claimed that his listening post had intercepted a series of high-altitude transmissions that should have been impossible. The signals used an archaic British military encryption code that had been retired in 1945, but the content was a series of current Soviet troop movements in the Mediterranean. This phenomenon, known as spectral intelligence, suggested that the SAS unit trapped in the blind horizon was not just repeating the past, but was somehow observing the future from their position outside of linear time. The void was acting as a lens or a dark mirror reflecting the events of the world back into the desert, while the men within remained frozen in their 1942 reality. This new development forced the British Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, to reconsider the nature of the metallic dust found at the canyon site. Reanalysis of the samples using modern electron microscopy revealed that the dust particles were not just metal, but were microcrystalline structures that resembled a primitive form of computer memory. Each grain of dust held a fragment of a sensory perception, a flash of light, a scrap of sound, or the feeling of heat. The desert was literally turning the SAS soldiers and the German convoy into a physical database. The erasure was actually a process of total data extraction, where every atom of the human subjects was being recorded into the silicate structure of the Sahara. The SAS unit hadn't vanished into nothingness, they had been transformed into the hardware of a planetary-scale recording device. In 1981, a high-ranking official within the UK Ministry of Defence leaked a document that suggested a third search mission had been conducted using early satellite thermal imaging. The satellite images showed that the canyon floor emitted a consistent heat signature that formed the perfect outline of a military encampment, including the 8 German trucks and the 3 British jeeps. However, the thermal signatures showed the vehicles in motion, circling each other in a slow, eternal dance that never ended. This thermal loop confirmed that the kinetic energy of the original 1942 encounter was still being recycled within the anomaly. The SAS unit was still attempting to intercept the convoy, and the Germans were still attempting to protect their cargo, and this confrontation was being reenacted every second for nearly 40 years in a hidden pocket of the desert. The most terrifying discovery of this period was the realization that the anomaly was slowly migrating. Precise satellite measurements over a 5-year period showed that the center of the magnetic vortex had moved 300 meters to the east. The void was not anchored to the canyon. It was an autonomous entity that was feeding on the surrounding environment to maintain its stability. As it moved, it left behind a trail of the same metallic dust and erased any local flora or fauna that crossed its path. The British authorities realized that if the anomaly reached a populated oasis or a major transport route, the results would be catastrophic. The amnesia field would strip the identities of hundreds of people before anyone even realized a threat was present. The decision was made to establish a permanent containment zone under the guise of an international geological preserve. The final block of Part 4 focuses on the missing pages of the Pritchard file. In 1989, a researcher discovered a series of photographs in a private collection that allegedly showed the SAS unit hours before their final radio transmission. The men looked gaunt and their uniforms were ragged, but their eyes showed a strange, luminescent quality similar to the crystalline dust. In one photo, Captain Pritchard is seen holding his brass compass, but the metal of the device appears to be melting and merging with the skin of his hand. This biological fusion was the final stage of the transition. The men were no longer separate from their equipment or the anomaly itself. They had become the living components of the blind horizon, the first humans to be fully integrated into a non-biological information system. The mission was no longer about a secret weapon. It was about the birth of a new and terrifying form of existence in the heart of the Sahara. The modern legacy of Operation Blind Horizon remains one of the most disturbing chapters in the history of British military intelligence. Into the 21st century, the restricted area in the Libyan desert is monitored by a network of global surveillance satellites that are programmed to look for specific spectral shifts in the infrared range. These shifts indicate that the anomaly is still active and continues to process the desert floor into its unique crystalline matter. In 2005, a leaked report from a private military contractor suggested that a team of remote sensing specialists detected a massive burst of radio frequency energy coming from the canyon coordinates. The energy was not a random noise, but a perfectly structured signal that contained the entire archive of the SAS unit's personal service records. It was as if the void was finally broadcasting the data it had extracted from the men in 1942 back into the modern communication grid. The scientific consensus among the few who have access to the Black Archive is that the German prototype accidentally created a quantum information trap. According to this theory, the high-frequency field did not destroy the SAS soldiers, but encoded their quantum states into the silicate crystals of the Saharan sand. This means that the desert itself has become a sentient hard drive that stores the lives and thoughts of Pritchard and his men. The amnesia field experienced by search teams was simply the device trying to upload new biological data from anyone who entered the perimeter. The Sahara is no longer just a landscape, but a massive organic computer that has been running a single unfinished program for over 80 years. The mission of Captain Pritchard has been preserved in a state of digital immortality where the war never ends and the desert never forgets. Recent archaeological surveys near the edge of the containment zone have discovered shadow images etched into the desert rocks. And these images are not carvings, but are the result of a localized radiation event that occurred at the moment of the 1942 disappearance. They show the silhouettes of British soldiers in their desert gear, frozen in a state of eternal movement. These acoustic shadows are a physical manifestation of the soldiers' final moments captured by the desert stone. The Foreign Office continues to deny the existence of these findings, but several independent researchers have published thermal photos showing that these shadows retain a constant temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, the exact temperature of a living human body. This suggests that the erased soldiers are still physically present in some form, maintaining their biological signature within the mineral structure of the mountains. The mystery of Column X remains the ultimate black hole of World War II history. No blueprints of the German device have ever been found in any European archive, and no German scientist ever stepped forward to claim responsibility for its design. It is as if the technology itself was also erased from the minds of those who created it. Some historians suggest that the prototype was not a German invention at all, but was a found object that the Abwehr was simply trying to transport across the desert. This would explain why the convoy was moving in such a bizarre and unsecured manner. They were carrying something they did not understand and could not control. The SAS unit was not just a victim of a German weapon, but was caught in the crossfire of a physical anomaly that predates human civilization. Today, the Great Sand Sea remains a place of profound silence and hidden danger. The Permanent Containment Zone is still officially listed as a geological preserve, but any unauthorized approach is met with immediate intervention by unmarked military aircraft. The files on Operation Blind Horizon are scheduled for declassification in the year 2042, exactly 100 years after the disappearance. However, many believe that there will be nothing left to declassify by then. The void is still moving and still feeding, and the metallic dust is slowly covering more of the desert floor. The story of Captain Pritchard and the SAS unit that was erased from history serves as a grim reminder that there are places on this earth where the rules of man and the laws of physics simply do not apply. The desert has claimed its secret, and it will not give it back until every scrap of information has been processed into the silence of the dunes. What do you think? Was this a military breakthrough? or an operation they erased on purpose.